The rain comes down in sheets, turning the windshield into a blur of darkness and light as I grip the steering wheel and accelerate toward the iron gates of the Sinclair estate. My heart pounds against my ribs, not from fear but from anticipation, from the culmination of 3 years of preparation leading to this single moment. I jerk the wheel hard to the left and feel the car spin, hydroplaning across the slick asphalt before slamming into the stone wall that borders the property. The impact throws me forward, the seatbelt cutting into my chest, and I taste copper as my lip splits against something hard. Perfect. I fumble with shaking fingers to unfasten myself, to crawl through the shattered window, to collapse onto the wet gravel where the headlights of my ruined car illuminate the rain like falling silver. I am Eleanor Webb tonight, a woman running from violence, seeking shelter in the one place no one would ever think to look. I am not Detective Eleanor Wentworth. I am not the daughter of Robert Wentworth, whose body was found in a warehouse 10 years ago with 3 bullets in his chest and a Sinclair calling card left on his tongue. I am no one. I am nothing. I am whatever I need to be to get through those gates. Footsteps crunch on gravel, and I force myself to tremble harder, to let the rain mix with genuine tears I summon by thinking of my father's funeral, of the empty casket, because they never recovered all of him. A flashlight beam sweeps across my face, and I flinch away, raising one hand to shield my eyes, while the other clutches my bleeding forehead. He stands over me like a pillar of shadow, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark coat slick with rain. Henry Sinclair, son of the devil himself. His face is carved from stone, all sharp angles and cold assessment, and his eyes move over me with clinical detachment, as though cataloging my injuries, my threat level, my worth. I see him decide I am none of these things, just a broken woman on his doorstep. He crouches beside me and his voice cuts through the storm, low and commanding. Can you walk? It is not a question, but an evaluation. I nod weakly, and he pulls me to my feet with surprising gentleness, his grip firm but not cruel. I lean into him because I must, because my cover demands vulnerability, but something in the solid warmth of him catches me off guard. He smells like rain and sandalwood, and something darker underneath. He half carries me through the gates and up a winding drive lined with ancient oaks, and the mansion materializes from the darkness, like a creature rising from deep water. Marble columns, glowing windows, the obscene wealth built on blood and broken lives. My father's blood. I catalog everything through my pain-blurred vision while Henry delivers clipped instructions to the guards who materialize from shadows. Inside, the warmth hits me like a physical force, and I sway against him. Then I see him. Frederick Sinclair stands in the doorway of what must be his study, silhouetted against amber light. He does not move, does not speak, simply watches me with eyes that have ordered men buried alive, and I feel those eyes crawling over my skin, searching for the truth I have hidden so carefully beneath this mask of helplessness. He smiles, and my blood turns to ice. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from and what time is it. It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you. I wake to silk sheets and the scent of lavender, my body aching in places I forgot could hurt, and for a moment I do not know where I am. The ceiling above me is painted with cherubs and clouds, a Renaissance fantasy that belongs in a museum, not hovering over a woman who crashed her car into a wall 2 days ago. 2 days. The knowledge hits me like a second impact and I sit up too fast, my head spinning, my vision swimming with dark spots that slowly resolve into the shape of a man sitting in a chair beside my bed. Henry Sinclair watches me with those unreadable eyes, a book open on his lap, though I doubt he has been reading. "You have been unconscious," he says, and his voice carries neither accusation nor sympathy, merely fact. "Dr. Chen says you had a concussion and needed rest." I touch my forehead and find bandages there, professionally applied, and I wonder what else this family doctor has seen, what other wounds he has patched in service to the Sinclairs. My cover story rises to my lips automatically, rehearsed so many times it feels like truth. My name is Eleanor Webb. I was running from someone, my ex. He found me again and I panicked, and the road was slick and I lost control. Henry tilts his head slightly, a predator assessing prey, and I see his father in that gesture, that patient evaluation of weakness. Your ex, he repeats. Does this ex have a name? Marcus, I whisper, letting my voice crack on the syllable, letting fear I do not feel bleed into my expression. Please do not send me back to him. Please. Something flickers in Henry's jaw, a muscle tightening, and he rises from his chair with fluid grace. His hands reach toward me, and I flinch instinctively. But he only checks my bandages, his fingers clinical and impossibly gentle against my bruised skin. These hands have hurt people, I remind myself. These hands have enforced his father's will. But they touch me like I am something fragile, something worth being careful with. My father wants to meet you, he says. Dinner tonight. You will need to be presentable. The walk to Frederick's study takes us through corridors lined with old masters and armed men who pretend to be invisible. I count 7 guards, 4 visible cameras, 3 locked doors requiring keycards. The security system is state-of-the-art, the kind that costs more than my annual salary, and I memorize every detail while leaning on Henry's arm like a woman still weak from her ordeal. He does not speak, but I feel his tension in the rigidity of his muscles, in the way his breathing changes as we approach the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall. Whatever waits behind those doors frightens even the son of the house. We stop at the threshold, and Henry's hand tightens on my elbow, a warning or a reassurance. I cannot tell which. He looks at me with something almost like concern, and I realize with a start that he believes my story. He believes I am a victim seeking shelter. The irony burns in my throat like bile. I am no victim. I am the weapon aimed at his father's heart. The doors swing open, and Frederick Sinclair's voice drifts out like smoke. Bring her in, Henry. I am eager to know our guest. The dining room stretches before me like a stage set for my execution. A mahogany table long enough to seat 20, but laid with only 3 place settings clustered at one end, beneath a crystal chandelier that fragments the candlelight into 1,000 tiny blades. Frederick Sinclair sits at the head, naturally, his silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome once, before cruelty carved its permanent lines around his mouth and eyes. He gestures to the chair at his right, and I take it, feeling Henry settle into the seat across from me, like a silent sentinel, whose allegiance I cannot yet determine. The first course arrives, a delicate soup the color of autumn leaves, and Frederick begins his interrogation with the precision of a surgeon selecting his instruments. Where were you born, Miss Webb? Where did you attend school? What did your father do for a living? I answer each question with the lies I have rehearsed until they feel like memories, watching his eyes for any flicker of disbelief, and I notice the woman who emerges from the shadows behind his chair. Maria Crawford. I recognize her from the case files, Frederick's most trusted advisor, his enforcer in silk and pearls. She watches me with undisguised contempt, and I understand immediately that she sees me as a threat to her position, her access, her carefully cultivated power. The soup gives way to fish, the fish to lamb, and Frederick's questions grow sharper, more personal, probing the wounds of my fabricated history with fingers designed to find weakness. Tell me about this Marcus, he says, and his voice carries the false warmth of a man who has learned to mimic concern without ever feeling it. Tell me what he did to make you run so far. I let my hand tremble as I set down my fork, let my eyes drop to my lap, let the silence stretch until it becomes its own kind of answer. He hurt me, I whisper, in ways I cannot speak of at dinner. Frederick leans forward, and I see hunger in his gaze, the appetite of a predator who feeds on vulnerability. But before he can press further, Henry's voice cuts through the tension like a blade. Father. She is a guest, not a suspect. The words hang in the air between them, charged with histories I cannot read, and I watch Frederick's expression shift from annoyance to calculation to something that might be respect. He inclines his head slightly, and the interrogation ends as abruptly as it began. After dinner, Henry walks me back through the labyrinth of corridors, his hand hovering at the small of my back without quite touching. At my door he pauses, his face half in shadow, and when he speaks his voice is barely above a whisper. My father collects broken things, Miss Webb. He finds them, fixes them, and then he owns them. Nothing in this house is safe, nothing and no one. I look up at him, at the warning in his eyes, at the tension in his jaw, and I feel something shift in my chest that has nothing to do with my mission. Thank you, I say, and I mean it. And that is the most dangerous thing of all. He nods once and disappears into the darkness, leaving me to wonder whether Henry Sinclair is my greatest obstacle or my only ally in this glittering cage. The burner phone is exactly where I left it, taped inside the lining of my suitcase beneath a false bottom that would only reveal itself to someone who knew to look for it, and my fingers tremble as I power it on for the first time since entering this gilded prison. Thomas answers on the second ring, his voice tight with barely contained frustration. "You were supposed to check in 48 hours ago," he says, and I can hear the accusation beneath the concern, the implication that I have already failed before I have truly begun. I give him the details in clipped sentences, the layout of the house, the number of guards, the location of Frederick's study, the dinner interrogation that felt more like a vivisection. He listens without interrupting, and when I finish, he sighs in a way that makes my stomach clench. "The task force is losing patience, Eleanor," he says. "They want actionable intelligence within the week, or they are pulling you out and trying a different approach." I want to scream at him that infiltrating a crime family is not like ordering takeout, that trust must be earned in millimeters, not miles. But I swallow the words and promise to deliver before ending the call and hiding the phone once more. Sleep eludes me that night, my mind racing through scenarios and contingencies, and at 3 a.m. I abandon the pretense of rest and wander the darkened corridors in search of something I cannot name. The library draws me like a moth to flame, its towering shelves and leather armchairs promising a sanctuary from the weight of my deception. But when I push open the heavy door, I discover I am not alone. Henry Sinclair sits in a pool of lamplight, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, his jacket discarded and his sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He looks up at my entrance and something passes across his face, surprise perhaps, or recognition of a kindred insomniac. "You cannot sleep either," he says, and it is not a question but an invitation to share in his vigil. I settle into the chair across from him and accept the drink he pours without asking, the whiskey burning a path down my throat that feels like honesty. We talk about nothing and everything, about books we have loved and places we have never seen, and slowly the conversation turns to ghosts, to the things that keep us awake when the world goes quiet. "My mother died when I was 12, he says, his voice flat in the way that comes from rehearsing pain until it loses its edges. She was beautiful and kind, and she loved me in a way no one has since." He pauses, and in the silence I hear the accusation he does not speak, the hint that Frederick bears responsibility for that death. I find myself leaning toward him, drawn by his vulnerability, and I recognize with horror that I am feeling something beyond professional interest. I retreat to my room at dawn, exhausted and unsettled, and the moment I step through the door, I know something is wrong. My belongings have been moved, subtly but unmistakably, a drawer not quite closed, a shoe pointing the wrong direction. Someone has searched my room and found nothing because there is nothing to find, but the message is clear. I am being watched. The walls of this beautiful prison are closing in. Frederick summons me to his study 3 days after the dinner interrogation. And I know before he speaks that this is another test in the endless series of trials he designs for those who enter his orbit. He offers me a position managing one of his restaurants, a charming Italian place called Bella Sera in the heart of the city, and his smile never reaches his eyes as he explains that I clearly need employment, and he rewards loyalty with opportunity. I accept with gratitude I do not feel, understanding that this gift is a leash disguised as kindness, a way to keep me close and useful while he decides whether I am worth keeping alive. My first day at Bella Sera reveals exactly what I expected and what Thomas desperately needs. The books are a masterpiece of creative accounting. Cash flowing in from sources that have nothing to do with pasta and everything to do with the empire Frederick has built on blood and silence. I memorize account numbers, supplier names, the faces of men who arrive after hours with duffel bags that never appear on any inventory list. The manager, a nervous man named Gerald who sweats when he lies, shows me the legitimate operations while carefully steering me away from the back office where the real business happens. I smile and nod and catalog every detail for the report I will make tonight. Another piece of the puzzle that will eventually become the case that destroys this family. I am elbow deep in invoices when the front door chimes, and I look up to find Henry Sinclair standing in a shaft of afternoon sunlight, his dark suit somehow making the expensive restaurant look shabby by comparison. He smiles, an expression that transforms his face from intimidating to devastating, and announces that he is taking me to lunch because no one should spend their first day eating alone in a supply closet. We walk to a small cafe 3 blocks away, the kind of place that serves perfect sandwiches and does not launder money for criminal enterprises, and for an hour I almost forget why I am here. He tells me about his time at university in England, about the dreams he had before duty called him home, about the dog he wanted as a child but never received because Frederick considered pets a weakness. I find myself laughing at his stories, leaning toward him across the small table, feeling the heat of attraction build in my chest despite every warning screaming in my mind. He is charming and warm and almost normal, and I have to remind myself repeatedly that this man has blood on his hands, that his charm is a weapon as surely as any gun. We are walking back to Bella Sera when I see him, a face from another life, a low-level dealer named Vincent Marsh, whom I arrested 4 years ago for distribution. My blood turns to ice as he enters the restaurant, his eyes scanning the room in the paranoid pattern of a man who has learned to expect danger from every direction. I turn away, pressing close to Henry, and he wraps an arm around my shoulders with concern darkening his features. "What is wrong?" he murmurs against my hair, and I whisper that I thought I saw someone from before, someone connected to Marcus, and he accepts the lie without question because it fits the story I have constructed. The gown is the color of midnight, a cascade of silk that clings to curves I usually hide beneath practical clothing, and as I stare at my reflection in the gilded mirror, I see a stranger wearing my face. The woman looking back at me belongs in this world of champagne and crystal chandeliers, but I know the truth that hides beneath the borrowed elegance. I am a fraud in designer fabric, a wolf dressed as a lamb, and tonight I will dance with the enemy while memorizing the faces of every criminal who passes through these doors. Henry appears behind me in the mirror, devastating in a tailored black suit that makes his shoulders look impossibly broad, and his eyes travel the length of my body with an appreciation that sends heat flooding through my veins. "You look beautiful," he says, and the simplicity of the compliment undoes something in my chest because he sounds almost surprised, as if he is seeing me for the first time. The ballroom is a sea of power and privilege, men in $1,000 suits discussing territories and shipments in coded language while their wives drip diamonds and feign ignorance. I catalog faces as Henry leads me through the crowd, matching names to surveillance photos, building the case with every handshake and air kiss. Frederick holds court near the grand piano, his silver hair gleaming beneath the chandeliers, and when he raises his glass to announce a major expansion into new markets, I understand he is declaring war on rival families without ever speaking the words. Henry pulls me onto the dance floor, and suddenly his hand is on my waist. his fingers pressing into the silk at the small of my back, and the proximity overwhelms every rational thought in my head. We move together as if we have done this 1,000 times, his thigh brushing mine with each turn, his breath warm against my temple, and I hate myself for the way my body responds to his nearness. I am gathering intelligence, I remind myself, even as my hand tightens on his shoulder and I lean closer to inhale the clean masculine scent of his cologne. Maria Crawford corners me in the bathroom 20 minutes later, her smile sharp as broken glass. "I do not know what you are," she hisses, "but I will find out, and when I do, you will wish you had died on that road." I am still shaking when Henry finds me in the garden, the cool night air a balm against my flushed skin. "What did she say to you?" he demands, and before I can answer, he cups my face in his hands and kisses me beneath a canopy of stars. The kiss is fire and destruction, months of tension igniting in a single moment, and I respond before my training can intervene. Then gunshots shatter the night, distant but unmistakable, and Henry throws me to the ground, covering my body with his own. His heart pounds against my back, his arms cage me in protective ferocity, and I realize with terrifying clarity that this man would die for me, without hesitation. The security breach is contained within minutes, but something between us has breached forever. The aftermath of the security breach transforms the mansion into a war room, and I watch from the shadows as Frederick Sinclair becomes something more terrifying than the calculating patriarch I have come to know. A rival family, the Morettis, sent 3 men to breach the perimeter as a message, a declaration that Frederick's expansion will not go unchallenged, and now the air itself seems to crackle with the promise of violence. Frederick's orders are precise and brutal. Find the men responsible, make examples of them, ensure that no one ever considers such an insult again. I memorize every word, every name, every location mentioned in the rapid-fire planning session, knowing that Thomas needs this intelligence, even as my stomach turns at what it represents. But it is Henry who truly horrifies me, because the man who kissed me beneath the stars has vanished entirely, replaced by someone I barely recognize. His voice is cold as he discusses logistics with his father's lieutenants, his hands steady as he checks the weapon at his hip. His eyes empty of everything soft I thought I had seen in him. This is who he really is, I tell myself. This is the monster beneath the charming facade, but my heart refuses to accept what my eyes confirm. I slip away during the chaos to contact Thomas from the bathroom, my whispered report clinical and complete. Names, addresses, timeline for retaliation. His response makes my blood freeze. "Let it happen," he instructs. "We need documented evidence of violence to make the RICO case stick," and I end the call before I say something that will compromise everything I have worked for. Let it happen. Let men die so we can fill out paperwork. I stare at my reflection and wonder when I became someone who weighs lives on a bureaucratic scale. Henry comes to my room at 2 in the morning, still wearing the same suit from the gala, though his tie is gone and his collar is open. He does not touch me, does not try to recreate the magic of our kiss, simply sinks into the chair by my window and stares out at the darkness beyond. "I could not sleep," he says, and the exhaustion in his voice goes deeper than one sleepless night. We talk until the sky begins to lighten, about nothing and everything, about the weight of expectations and the cage of legacy, and the person you might have been if circumstances had been different. He confesses that he wanted to be an architect once, to build things instead of destroying them, and the rawness of his admission makes my chest ache. I almost tell him then. The words rise in my throat like a confession, like absolution, like the worst betrayal I could commit. "I am not who you think I am. I am here to destroy your family. I am falling in love with you despite everything." But I swallow the truth and offer him silence instead. And when dawn breaks, he leaves my room without touching me, somehow having shared more intimacy than any physical act could provide. Later that morning, Maria Crawford presents her findings to Frederick in his study, and I am not meant to hear, but the walls have ears, and I have learned where to press mine. Eleanor Webb, she announces with triumph, poisoning every syllable, does not exist before 18 months ago. The shadow follows me through the morning market, a man in a gray jacket who pretends to examine produce while tracking my every movement, and I let him watch because breaking cover now would be suicide. Frederick knows. Maybe not everything, maybe not the truth, but he knows enough to assign me a tale, and the weight of surveillance presses against my spine like a physical hand. I browse through stalls of fresh flowers and artisanal bread, the picture of innocence, while my mind races through escape routes and contingencies and the desperate need to contact Thomas before this house of cards collapses entirely. The burner phone burns against my thigh, hidden in a pocket I sewed into my dress myself, but I cannot risk using it with eyes on me constantly. At lunch, Henry finds me in the estate kitchen, his expression tight with something that might be anger or might be fear, and he tells me that his father questioned him for 2 hours this morning about our relationship. "I defended you," he says quietly, his back to the door where anyone might be listening. "I told him you are exactly who you claim to be." The words are a gift and a condemnation because his faith in me is built on lies, and every moment he spends protecting me puts him further in his father's crosshairs. Maria presents her full findings at dinner that evening, spreading documents across the table like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. No birth certificate before 18 months ago, no school records, no employment history, no trace of Eleanor Webb anywhere in any database until she materialized fully formed with a driver's license and a sad story about an abusive ex. Frederick listens in silence, his face revealing nothing, and then he turns to me with a smile that makes my blood run cold. "Everyone deserves a chance to prove their loyalty," he announces, and his tone suggests this is not a gift, but a test designed to fail. The package is small, wrapped in brown paper, and I am not to open it or ask questions, simply deliver it to an address across town and return immediately. I know what this is: drugs or money or something worse, something that will bind me to their crimes with evidence they can use against me later. I take the package with steady hands and a grateful smile, and the moment I am alone in my car, I drive to the parking garage where Thomas waits in an unmarked sedan. We have 4 minutes before my tail catches up, enough time to photograph the contents, white powder in sealed bags worth more than my annual salary, and document the chain of custody that will eventually put Frederick Sinclair behind bars. The delivery goes smoothly, a man in a warehouse who counts the bags and nods without speaking, and I return to the estate feeling like I have swallowed broken glass. Henry waits in my room, standing by the window where he once confessed his dreams of a different life, and his expression tells me that somewhere between the market and this moment, something has gone terribly wrong. "You made an unscheduled stop," he says, and I know with sickening certainty that my 4 minutes of freedom were not as invisible as I believed. The accusation hangs between us like smoke, like poison, like everything I have been dreading since the moment I crashed my car outside these gates and let Henry Sinclair carry me into his world. "You made an unscheduled stop," he repeats, and his voice is quiet in that terrifying way that reminds me of his father, controlled fury barely leashed beneath the surface. I open my mouth to lie, to spin another story, to weave another layer of deception over the foundation of falsehoods that has become my entire existence. But the words taste like ash on my tongue, and I cannot force them past my lips. He moves through my room like a predator, opening drawers and checking behind furniture, searching for something that will confirm the suspicions Maria has planted in his mind. I watch him work and feel nothing but exhaustion, bone-deep weariness from carrying secrets that have grown too heavy for one person to bear. He finds nothing, because I have learned to leave no traces, no burner phones or hidden documents or damning evidence. Everything important exists only in my memory, where no one can reach it. The absence of proof does not comfort him. I can see it in the rigid line of his shoulders and the way his hands clench and unclench at his sides. And when he finally turns to face me, the betrayal in his eyes cuts deeper than any accusation. "Who are you working for?" he demands. "The Morettis or someone else?" And I realize he thinks I am a spy for rival criminals rather than something far worse. I deny it, because that much at least is not a lie, watching his jaw tighten as he processes my words and finds them insufficient. The gulf between us feels oceanic now. All the intimacy we built through sleepless conversations and stolen glances dissolving in the acid of his distrust. He moves toward the door, and my heart cracks along fault lines I did not know existed, because watching him walk away feels like losing something I was never supposed to want in the first place. But he stops with his hand on the handle, his back still turned, and I watch his shoulders rise and fall with a breath that seems to cost him everything. When he turns back, the anger has transformed into something rawer, something desperate and hungry and terrified, and he crosses the room in 3 strides to crush his mouth against mine. The kiss is nothing like the gentle exploration in the garden. This is claiming and questioning and demanding all at once, and I respond with equal ferocity because I am so tired of fighting what I feel. We stumble toward the bed, his hands in my hair and mine fisted in his shirt, and we come dangerously close to crossing a line that cannot be uncrossed. But he pulls back at the last moment, breathing hard, his forehead pressed against mine, and his eyes searching my face for answers I cannot give. "I will protect you from my father," he whispers. "Whatever you are hiding, whatever you have done, I will keep you safe." The promise shatters something inside me, because he does not know what he is offering, does not understand that protecting me means destroying everything he has ever known. I am in love with him. The realization crashes over me like cold water, undeniable and catastrophic, and completely incompatible with everything I came here to do. The mission is compromised. I am compromised, and I have no idea how to save either of us from what comes next. Thomas sits at table 7 with a menu he is not reading, and the sight of my handler in this place where I have built my careful web of lies sends ice water flooding through my veins. He orders coffee and a sandwich like any ordinary customer, but his eyes find mine across the dining room, and the message in them is unmistakable. Everything is about to change. I make my way to his table with a notepad, playing the role of attentive restaurant manager, and he speaks without looking up from the menu while I pretend to take his order. "The operation is accelerating," he murmurs. "Federal task force is taking over. They want Frederick Sinclair within the week," and I realize with dawning horror that decisions about my life and my mission have been made in rooms I was never invited to enter. He tells me about backroom deals and jurisdictional handoffs, about how the evidence I gathered has been folded into a larger investigation that treats me as an asset rather than an agent, a tool to be used and discarded when no longer necessary. I am a pawn. I understand now, moved across a board by players who never bothered to learn my name. Thomas cannot meet my eyes when he admits his own complicity, how he traded my safety for career advancement and federal cooperation, and I walk away from his table with a smile fixed on my face and murder in my heart. The drive back to the estate feels like a funeral procession, my own death approaching with every mile of manicured roadway. I know something is wrong the moment I step through the front door because Maria stands in the foyer with 2 guards flanking her, and triumph blazing in her dark eyes like a fire she has been waiting years to light. She holds a photograph, grainy but unmistakable, showing a younger version of me in police academy dress uniform, and beneath it paperwork that should have been destroyed, but clearly was not. "Eleanor Wentworth," she announces to the empty hallway, "graduate of the State Police Academy, decorated detective, currently assigned to Organized Crime Task Force," and each word is a nail in my coffin. The guards seize my arms before I can run or fight or do anything but watch my carefully constructed life crumble into ash around me. They march me through corridors I once walked freely, past servants who avert their eyes, into Frederick Sinclair's study, where the patriarch waits with patience more terrifying than any rage. He dismisses the guards with a wave, leaving just the two of us in this room full of priceless art and unspeakable secrets. He studies me for a long moment, this man who ordered my father's death, and when he finally speaks, his voice is almost gentle. "Does my son know what you are?" he asks, and I understand immediately that my answer will determine not just my fate, but Henry's as well. "No," I tell him, and the truth of it burns because I had so many chances to confess and chose the lie each time. Frederick nods slowly, believing me, and something in his expression suggests this answer has saved Henry from consequences I cannot imagine. Then he gestures to the guards waiting outside and hands close around my arms again, dragging me toward the basement stairs and the darkness waiting below. The cell beneath the mansion is a concrete box that smells of damp earth and old fear, and I measure its dimensions in footsteps because counting gives me something to do besides scream. 8 paces long, 6 paces wide, a rusted cot bolted to one wall and a drain in the floor that suggests purposes I refuse to contemplate. The luxury I lived in for weeks feels like a fever dream now. Silk sheets and crystal chandeliers replaced by rough walls that scrape my palms when I touch them, and a single bare bulb that never turns off. Frederick visits on the second day, descending the stairs with the unhurried grace of a man who has all the time in the world, because he controls time itself in this kingdom beneath the earth. He explains my fate with the clinical detachment of someone discussing weather patterns, tells me I will be used to send a message to every law enforcement agency that dares infiltrate his organization, that my death will be slow enough to film and public enough to terrify. I keep my face blank while he speaks, but my mind races through escape scenarios, calculating odds and discarding plans, refusing to accept that this concrete tomb will become my grave. He leaves without waiting for a response because my words no longer matter, and I am alone again with the humming of the bulb and the weight of stone above my head. Somewhere in the mansion above me, Henry is being told I fled in the night, abandoned him without a word after everything we shared, and I know him well enough to know he will not believe it. I picture him searching my empty room for clues, finding my clothes still in the closet and my borrowed jewelry on the dresser, the small details that contradict the story his father has constructed. Maria will watch his pain with satisfaction, her victory complete after weeks of trying to expose me, and I hate her with a purity that feels almost cleansing in its simplicity. My guard is a young man named James, whose hands shake when he brings me food, whose eyes slide away from mine like he cannot bear to look directly at what he is participating in. I study him across the barrier of iron bars, cataloging the wedding ring on his finger and the photograph of a child that peeks from his shirt pocket when he bends. I ask about his daughter on the third day, and he flinches like I have struck him, tells me to shut up in a voice that wavers, and I know I have found the crack in his armor that might save my life. I appeal to his humanity in fragments, never pushing too hard, mentioning my own father in past tense, and watching guilt flicker across his features. Above me, though I cannot see it, Henry tears through his father's office looking for answers, and our parallel struggles toward each other form a tension that stretches through floors of stone. I work at my restraints in the dark hours, finding a weakness in the bolts that anchor the cot to the wall, and I tell myself that rescue is coming, even as I prepare to rescue myself. Henry corners Maria in the wine cellar on the 4th day of my imprisonment, and I learn this later from his own lips, but I can picture it perfectly. The way his hand closed around her throat, the way her smugness crumbled into fear when she realized the son had inherited more of the father than anyone suspected. She admits everything because she has no choice, spits the truth at him like venom she hopes will poison whatever he felt for me. Eleanor Wentworth, she tells him, detective with the Organized Crime Task Force, sent to destroy your family, sent to destroy you. His world shatters in that moment and reforms into something harder, sharper, a landscape of betrayal where his father lied and the woman he loves is his enemy, and nothing he believed was ever real. But Maria makes one crucial mistake in her moment of triumph. She tells him where I am being kept, describes the basement cell and Frederick's plans for my public execution, and whatever Henry feels about my deception is eclipsed by the simple, impossible fact that I'm going to die unless he acts. He finds the basement entrance through a passage even I never discovered, fights past two guards with a brutality that leaves them unconscious and bleeding, and I hear the commotion before I see him. The cell door crashes open, and there he stands, knuckles split and chest heaving, and the expression on his face is a war between fury and relief, and something that looks terribly like love, despite everything. "You lied to me," he says, and the words are an accusation and a question and a plea all tangled together. I tell him yes. I tell him everything was a lie, expecting his hatred because hatred would be easier than this terrible, complicated thing stretching between us. But he reaches through the bars and touches my face with bloody fingers, and then he is working on the lock with tools he brought for exactly this purpose. We run through tunnels I mapped in my first weeks here, service passages that snake beneath the estate, and emerge in a groundskeeper's shed 200 meters from the main wall. The rain is falling again, soaking us instantly, and we run together through darkness while alarms begin to wail behind us. His family hunts us now, his own blood turned predator, and he does not look back even once. The safe house is a studio apartment above a laundromat in a part of the city the Sinclairs do not control, rented under a false name and stocked with supplies for exactly this emergency. We stand dripping on cheap linoleum, staring at each other across a distance that has nothing to do with physical space. He demands the full truth, and I give it to him in pieces that taste like broken glass. My real name, my badge number, my mission to destroy his father. And finally, the thing I have never told anyone, the reason I volunteered for this assignment, the memory that has driven me for 10 years. My father was Detective Robert Wentworth, I tell him, and Frederick Sinclair had him killed for getting too close to the truth. Henry closes his eyes when I say it, and when he opens them again, something fundamental has shifted in their depths. Henry is silent for a long time after I finish speaking, standing at the window of the safe house with his back to me, and I watch the tension in his shoulders and wonder if I have finally broken whatever fragile thing existed between us. The rain streaks down the glass like tears, and I count the seconds between lightning flashes, measuring the storm's retreat while waiting for the storm inside this room to break. When he finally turns, his face is not what I expected. Not rage, not disgust, but something that looks almost like relief, as if a puzzle he has been working on his entire life has finally revealed its solution. My father is a monster, he says, and the words come out flat and factual. The voice of a man stating something he has always known but never allowed himself to admit. He tells me about the things he has witnessed over 32 years, the disappearances he was taught not to question, the blood he learned to ignore, the way Frederick would stroke his hair with hands still stained from violence and call him son, like the word was a chain rather than a comfort. I listen without interrupting, understanding that this confession mirrors my own, that we are both laying down weapons we have carried too long. He crosses the room in 3 strides and takes my hands in his grip almost painful, and he tells me he will help me destroy his father. The words hang between us like a vow, and I search his eyes for doubt and find only certainty. Only the fierce determination of a man who has finally chosen which side of the war he belongs on. We plan together through the night, spreading maps and documents across the tiny kitchen table, combining my knowledge of law enforcement procedure with his intimate understanding of the Sinclair operation. He knows the locations of ledgers, the names of offshore accounts, the schedules of shipments that Frederick believes are secret, and each piece of information he offers is a nail in his father's coffin and a step away from everything he was raised to be. The intimacy of conspiracy is intoxicating, our heads bent together over evidence, our fingers brushing as we point to the same spots on the map, and somewhere in the small hours, the planning gives way to something else. He kisses me, and I kiss him back, and this time, there is no interruption, no holding back, no voice in my head reminding me of all the reasons this is wrong. We make love on the narrow bed with the rain still falling outside, and it feels like a seal on something new, a consummation of trust as much as desire. Afterward, we lie tangled together, honest and vulnerable in ways neither of us has been with anyone, and I tell him this might kill us both, and he says he knows, but some things are worth dying for. The knock on the door comes at dawn. Thomas stands in the hallway looking haggard and hunted, and before I can speak, he raises his hands in surrender and says he is here to help, that he knows he betrayed me to the feds, but he wants to make it right. The three of us sit around that tiny table as morning breaks, a fragile alliance formed from broken loyalties and desperate hope, and Thomas tells us what I already suspected. Frederick is moving his entire operation overseas in 48 hours, and if we do not act now, he will be beyond reach forever. The federal agents arrive at the safe house within 2 hours of Thomas making the call, grim-faced men and women who look at Henry like he is a bomb that might explode, and at me like I am already a ghost. They spread blueprints across every surface, photographs of the estate I know better than my own childhood home, and we plan the destruction of everything Frederick Sinclair has built. Henry will return to the mansion alone, will walk back into the lion's den with nothing but a story and recording devices, no larger than shirt buttons. Will face his father's rage and convince him that I escaped while Henry was unconscious from a guard's blow. The story is thin, but it might hold because Frederick needs to believe his son remains loyal, needs to believe that blood is thicker than whatever I represented. I watch Henry memorize the placement of each device, the activation sequences, the extraction protocols, and I want to scream at him not to go, to run with me to some distant place where the Sinclair name means nothing. But we both know that running means Frederick wins, means my father died for nothing, means Henry spends his life looking over his shoulder. The goodbye happens in the narrow hallway of the safe house, while agents pretend not to watch, and I press my forehead against his, and breathe him in, and tell him to come back to me. He cups my face in his hands and kisses me with a tenderness that feels like a promise, and then he says the words I never expected. I love you, Eleanor Wentworth, and when this is over, I want to build something that has nothing to do with either of our fathers. He leaves before I can respond, and I stand at the window watching him disappear into a cab that will take him back to hell. The hours that follow are the longest of my life, punctuated by static-filled reports from surveillance teams, by Thomas pacing the floor and checking his weapon compulsively, by my own heart beating so hard I can feel it in my teeth. Henry reaches the estate, and the shouting begins immediately. Frederick's voice captured by external microphones demanding explanations, threatening consequences, and then something worse. Silence that stretches for 17 agonizing minutes. When the audio returns, Henry is explaining in a broken voice how I overpowered a guard and fled, how he searched for me and failed, how he wants nothing more than to find me and make me pay for her betrayal. Frederick believes him because he needs to believe, because the alternative is unthinkable, because a father cannot accept that his son would choose a stranger over blood. Maria objects, and I hear her suspicious accusations, but Frederick overrules her with a dismissiveness that will cost him everything. The recording devices activate one by one as Henry moves through the study, capturing Frederick ordering my execution in clinical detail, discussing shipment routes and bribed officials and the bodies buried in foundations of buildings across the city. The evidence accumulates like a tide, and I sit in the surveillance van outside the walls, armed and terrified, and desperately in love with the man whose voice I can hear committing treason against his own blood, for me, for justice, for a future neither of us can see, but both of us are willing to die for. The raid commences at dawn, and I am the first through the gate, badge on my chest for the first time in months, weapon drawn, heart pounding with a terror that has nothing to do with the danger and everything to do with the man somewhere inside those walls. Federal agents swarm the estate like a tide of justice too long delayed, and the sound of flashbangs and shouted commands fills the air that once carried music from galas and whispered threats over dinner. I move through rooms I know intimately, past the library where Henry and I talked until dawn, past the dining room where Frederick interrogated me, past the garden where we shared our first kiss under stars that seemed impossibly distant from the violence that surrounded us. Gunfire erupts from the east wing, and I hear Maria's voice screaming orders. And then a single shot silences her forever, and I feel nothing but grim satisfaction that she will never threaten anyone again. Frederick is in his study when we find him, frantically feeding documents into a fireplace that cannot consume them fast enough, and his face when he sees me is almost worth every moment of terror I endured in his basement. He is smaller somehow, diminished, just an old man watching his empire crumble, and I read him his rights, with a voice that does not shake, even though my hands want to tremble. Then I hear the shot from the hallway, and my blood turns to ice because I know before anyone tells me, and I am running before conscious thought can catch up. Henry lies in the doorway of the study where we first talked, blood spreading beneath him, and an agent is stammering apologies about crossfire and confusion and friendly fire. But I hear none of it because I am on my knees beside him, pressing my hands against the wound in his side, screaming for medics. His eyes find mine and he tries to smile, tries to tell me it is not as bad as it looks, and I tell him to shut up and stay with me, to not dare leave me after everything we survived. Frederick passes us in handcuffs, and he stops, and he looks at his son bleeding on the floor beside the woman who destroyed everything, and I watch understanding dawn in those cold eyes, watch him realize how completely Henry chose me over him, watch something that might be grief or might be rage flicker and die as agents drag him away. The medics arrive and they work on Henry while I hold his hand and refuse to let go, and the ambulance ride is a blur of monitors and oxygen masks and prayers I did not know I still remembered. 1 year later, I stand before my father's grave with Henry beside me, his hand warm in mine, his testimony completed, and his reduced sentence served, and his life rebuilt from the ashes of a legacy he never wanted. I introduce him to the man whose death brought us together, and I tell my father that his murder has finally been answered, that the empire that destroyed him has crumbled, that I found something unexpected in the wreckage, love, real and complicated, and earned through fire. The rain begins to fall as we turn to leave, the same rain that brought Henry to my staged accident on that road outside the estate, and he opens an umbrella over both of us, pulling me close against the chill. We walk away together into a future we chose rather than inherited, equals at last, survivors of a war that should have killed us both, and the rain feels like absolution, like baptism, like the beginning of something neither of us dared to hope for.